Okay, picture this. You're in Carnegie Hall. It's 1935. Everyone's buzzing about the violinist Fritz Kreisler.
Mm-hmm.
And he starts playing these just incredible Baroque pieces, stuff no one's heard, supposedly dug up after centuries. People were calling him like a musical Indiana Jones.
Right. Finding lost treasure.
Exactly. But then, bam, the New York Times reveals these rediscovered gems. They were Kreisler's own work, probably written between concerts.
That's amazing.
And the reaction, all over the place. Some people felt totally duped. Others didn't care. One critic joked he'd violated the statute of limitations on humility.
Oh, good.
But the craziest thing, his concerts stayed sold out. Records kept selling.
Which is, I think, a perfect starting point for us. It really gets at this whole fascination with the lost masterpiece, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So this deep dive, it's not just like a list of musical fakes. We're trying to understand why we're so drawn to the past, what we mean by originality, and why finding that hidden gem is still so powerful.
And we've got sources covering centuries of this stuff, right? Up to modern forensics.
Absolutely. We'll trace it from the Romantic era right through to today's tech.
Okay, let's jump in. The 19th century. Sounds like they were really hungry for these newly discovered older pieces.
Yeah.
Why was that?
Well, you had this huge romantic idealization of the past genius, right? Like these almost mythical figures.
Mm-hmm.
And publishers were, well, pretty smart. They realized they could tap into that, slap long lost on a piece, hint it was found in some dusty corner.
Instant value. Artistically and, I guess, commercially.
Exactly. It was brilliant marketing, really, fed as the cultural desire to connect with a kind of romanticized history. These discoveries felt like a real link back to that golden age.
Okay, so give us some examples, these 19th century musical illusions.
Oh, yeah. There's Henri Quesadesis and this supposed Handel viola concerto in B minor.
Okay.
Came out in 1933. Big deal. Major find for the viola repertoire. Loads of performances. Critics loved it.
There's always a but.
But some people started noticing the harmonies. They sounded a bit impressionistic.
Like Debussy-ish?
Yeah.
Not very Handel.
Not very Handel at all. Way later style. And sure enough, decades later, his family admitted Quesadesis wrote it himself.
Wow. Handel meets the 20th century early.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what about the Albinoni Adagio? Everyone knows that tune. It's everywhere.
Right, that haunting melody. The story goes that Remo Gisotto, a musicologist, rebuilt it from this tiny fragment found in Dresden after the war.
A fragment that
Nobody else has ever seen or verified. The general thinking now is Gisotto probably just composed the whole thing himself. Around 1945.
No way. But it's still listed as Albinoni.
Often, yeah. It's like this persistent musical myth. It just won't die.
Wild. And then there's Mozart, Symphony No. 37. That's another tangled story.
It really is. For almost 100 years, everyone just accepted it as Mozart.
Standard repertoire.
Totally. Until 1907, when this librarian, Alfred Orell, figured out most of it was actually by Michael Haydn.
Haydn's brother.
Yeah. Mozart had just written this new slow introduction for it.
So not really fraud, more like messy paperwork.
Pretty much. Sloppy cataloging, really. But it shows how easily attributions could stick back then, especially before things got more standardized.
It's just hard to imagine that time before copyright was really a thing. So
Yeah.
sticking Beethoven's name on something was basically free advertising.
You got it. And nobody really questioned it too much. It was, kind of a free-for-all.
But that changes in the 20th century.
Big time. You get proper copyright laws, the recording industry booms.
Yeah.
Suddenly, there's real money involved, big financial stakes.
So disputes weren't just academic anymore. They ended up in court.
Exactly. Which brings us to some pretty dramatic 20th century cases.
Okay, lay it on us. The stakes are higher. Lawsuits are flying.
Right. So think about the Joyce Hatto scandal. That was 2007.
I remember hearing about that. The pianist who was ill?
Yeah, she'd mostly retired, was battling cancer, but then released all these recordings, getting absolutely stellar reviews, like a late career miracle. After she died, an audio engineer was listening to her Liszt CD, and, his computer basically recognized the track.
Recognized them. As what?
As recordings by a completely different pianist, Laszlo Simon. They'd been digitally tweaked.
You're kidding. So her recordings were...
Fakes, digitally manipulated copies. The lawsuits against her husband's label were huge. It really made people question artistic legacy in the digital age, how easy it is to manipulate things.
That's mind-blowing. The digital angle is nuts.
Yeah.
What about the Shostakovich piece, the jazz suite?
Yes. The Suite for Jazz Orchestra No. 3. It was premiered, even recorded, around 2001, billed as this newly found Shostakovich work.
But his style is pretty distinctive.
Exactly. And his heirs noticed things that just didn't sound quite right. Stylistic hiccups.
So they dug deeper.
They did. And found it wasn't just not quite right. It had chunks lifted directly from Khachaturian, bits from obscure film score.
Oh, wow. So a deliberate cut-and-paste job.
Looked like it. Performances were stopped, the score got pulled, talk of fraud lawsuits. It shows how fiercely estates guard legacies now.
Makes sense. And even pop music cases had ripple effects, like the George Harrison one. My Sweet Lord.
Absolutely. That was 1976, Harrison versus the writers of He's So Fine. The big takeaway wasn't just about pop.
What was it?
The court ruled that even subconscious plagiarism counts as infringement.
Whoa. So you don't even have to mean to copy something.
According to that precedent, no. And
What?
that made classical composers who often, borrow folk tunes or reference older styles suddenly much more nervous.
Yeah, you'd have to be super careful about anything that sounded vaguely familiar.
Definitely. So all this legal stuff, it really put the pressure on. People got way more cautious about announcing lost treasures.
Which leads us to musical CSI.
Basically, any manuscript that pops up now claiming to be Bach or Mozart goes under the microscope. We're talking serious forensic techniques.
Okay, this sounds cool. What are we talking about? Like dusting for fingerprints?
Not quite, but close. Paper and watermark dating is a big one.
How does that work?
Analysts look at the paper under special light, measuring the lines left by the paper-making process, the chain lines.
Okay.
They compare those patterns to records from known paper mills. So if your Bach manuscript is on paper made in, say, 1860...
Red flag right there. Bach was long gone by then.
Exactly. Then there's the ink.
You can date ink?
You can analyze its chemical makeup. Iron gall ink was common, but the recipes varied by time and place. Using X-ray fluorescence, they can break down the elements.
So you could find, like, ink from 1900 Paris on a supposed Handel score.
Precisely. Dead giveaway. And they use light, too, right, to see hidden stuff?
Yeah, multispectral imaging. Different wavelengths of light, like UV, can reveal things erased underneath the main ink layer, like pencil sketches.
Exactly. There's this supposed Scarlatti sonata. Under UV light, they found sketches for Debussy's La Cathédrale Engloutie.
Debussy, that's not Scarlatti, not even close.
Not even close. It's like finding a car engine blueprint under a Roman chariot design.
Wow. And what about AI? Is that playing a role now?
It is, increasingly. Machine learning models get trained on huge amounts of verified music by a composer.
So the AI learns Bach's fingerprint.
Kind of, yeah. It's typical patterns, harmonies, how the musical lines move. Then you feed it the new discovery.
And it flags anything weird.
It flags deviations from the established style. It's not quite court-admissible evidence yet, but libraries use it to sort through donations, figure out what needs a closer look.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
But you're saying, even with all this tech, hoaxes still happen. Why?
I think deep down it comes back to that human element. We want to believe. We want that connection, that new piece from a composer we love. Forgers play on that.
That makes sense. But it's not always black and white, like pure deception, is it? There's that gray area homage parody.
Right. It's a crucial point. Composers borrow and transform all the time. Think of Respig's ancient airs and dances.
He uses old loop tunes.
Yeah, but he credits them, and you
Yeah.
can clearly hear his modern take on the harmony. It's transparent. Or Stravinsky's Pulcinella.
Based on Pergolesi.
Mostly. But Stravinsky puts his own rhythmic spin on it, his unique sound. It's clearly Stravinsky playing with Pergolesi. And Villa-Lobos used Bach textures in his Bachianas Brasileiras as an open tribute.
So the difference is intent, being upfront about it.
Intent is key. Legally, they look at, was there intent to deceive? Was there commercial gain from the deception? How similar is it, really?
And from a music perspective.
Musicologists might say pastiche or arrangement can be creative. Appropriation, if respectful, can be dialogue. But forgery, passing off new as old, breaks that fundamental trust.
Interestingly, you mentioned a case where a forgery actually helped musicologists.
Yeah, it's a weird twist. Back in '84, this mass, supposedly by Giovanni Battista Martini, fooled scholars for a bit.
Okay.
The forger had stuck really closely to the published rules of 18th century counterpoint, like textbook perfect.
Ah, so it sounded correct, but maybe lacked individuality.
Exactly. When the hoax came out, it became a teaching tool. Students could compare the forgery's by-the-book style to the real Martini's more nuanced personal writing. The fake helped highlight what made the real thing special.
That's brilliant, actually. And you said something similar about Kreisler's fakes.
Yeah, studying Kreisler's Pugliani forgeries tells you a lot about Pugliani by showing you what he didn't do.
How so?
Kreisler throws in things like these swoopy chromatic slides or that very Viennese way of stretching time, rubato. Beautiful, but totally wrong for Pugliani's era.
So the fake stuff highlights the style differences between the periods.
Precisely. The forgery acts like a contrast filter.
So despite all this, the deception, the analysis, why do listeners often seem to forgive or even enjoy these hoaxes, like with Kreisler?
I think there are a few things going on. One is just the power of a good story, right? The lost gem, the dramatic reveal. It's compelling.
We love a treasure hunt.
Totally. And then sometimes the music is just really good. Kreisler's pieces are still played because they're beautiful, regardless of who wrote them when.
The quality speaks for itself.
For many, yes. And maybe there's a touch of romanticism, too. Rooting for the clever underdog, thinking the music's impact matters more than the label.
But there has to be a downside to just shrugging it off, right? Doesn't it damage trust?
Oh, absolutely. Every time a fake gets exposed, it chips away a little bit at our confidence in program notes, research, online info.
Which is extra worrying now with deepfakes and all that.
Exactly. Maintaining credibility for archives and scholarship is huge right now.
So who's fighting the good fight? Who are the watchdogs?
Well, there are key groups. The International Association of Music Libraries, they have a database of doubtful attributions, publicly searchable.
That's useful.
The Back Archive in Leipzig puts a digital watermark, like a warning label, on scores in their online collection if the authenticity is shaky.
Smart. What about publishers?
Major ones known for accuracy, like Baronwriter, demand serious independent proof before they'll give a score their Urtext stamp.
That Urtext label means it's supposed to be the composer's pure intention, right?
That's the goal. It's a big deal for performers, carries weight. And then there's the crowd.
The crowd.
Crowdsourced detective work. There was this amazing Reddit thread where people figured out a newly found Schubert waltz was basically ripping off a 1950s accordion tune.
Get out! On Reddit.
Yep. The publisher had to pull the piece, immediately.
That's wild. So technology cuts both ways, enables forgery, but also helps catch it.
It's a paradox, isn't it? You can digitally mimic a signature, but high-res scans also let algorithms spot tiny digital artifacts the eye would miss.
Okay, so wrapping this up, what are the key takeaways for listeners, for musicians?
I'd say first, always be a little skeptical about provenance. Where did this piece really come from? Ask questions.
Don't just take the label at face value.
Right. Second, support transparency. Look for editions that show you the sources, the watermarks, the ink analysis info if it's available.
Demand the evidence.
Yeah. And finally, trust your ears.
Yeah.
Develop your critical listening. If something labeled Baroque sounds like Hollywood, maybe dig a little deeper.
Because music isn't just sound. It's also the story behind it. And authenticity helps that connection.
Exactly. That link between composer and listener.
So here's something to think about as you listen next time. If you found out a piece you absolutely love had a faked origin story, would it change how you feel about the music itself? Or does that emotional connection stand apart from the history?
Good question. And just a little teaser for our next deep dive. We're going into the world of codes and hidden messages in music.
Ooh, secret ciphers.
Secret ciphers, patriotic messages hidden in tunes, even a chord supposedly linked to cosmic insights.
Okay, you've got me hooked. Thanks so much for joining us on this dive into musical mysteries.
My pleasure.
Until next time, check those watermarks, keep listening critically, and maybe be a little suspicious of any long-lost masterpieces turning up in your attic.